Years ago, in the days before background checks, I worked at a bank. It was a small community bank, only a couple branches, and everyone pretty much knew each other. Most had been working there for a long time. In a move that surprised almost everyone except us young, cynical, bottom of the totem pole types who hadn't been there very long, they sold out to a much bigger corporate bank. Many of the old-timers who remained struggled with this, as it meant the end of going out to the bar for lunch and never coming back, and having to explain exactly what their jobs entailed that was beyond being a frat brother of the president of the bank in college. None of that stuff affected me, but it was fascinating to see this corporate culture install itself. And there's one thing that stuck with me ever since, and that was their approach to the phones. You see, they had a rule: no more than 3 rings. That meant that no phone should ever ring more than 3 times, and it was the responsibility of everyone within earshot to deal with it. I saw the CEO, numerous VPs, and upper management dudes sprinting for phones, and they always answered with a warm greeting and a smile. It was amazing. Now, it might seem trivial, but the truth is, the phones are where customers and clients can be won or lost. And if you aren't paying attention to what happens when you or your intake answers the phone, you could be making a costly mistake. But that's what we're talking about today on Lawsome, making sure your law firm is doing the right things when they pick up the phone. Are you ready? Let's go.
Lawsome, the podcast for law firms. Powered by ConsultWebs.
Welcome back to Lawsome, the only podcast for law firms that collates, alphabetizes, and staples your documents, and then throws them into the wind. We're here to inform, educate, and entertain the legal community on the latest personal and professional development. I am the best kept secret in Denver, Jake Sanders, and with me is Chicago's sweetheart, Paul Julius. Paul, I shouldn't even be talking to you right now.
How many times have we gone over this, man?
I keep breaking my claws. I should be hidden.
But I want to know, how did you win that award?
I ate like this giant burrito.
That's it.
and then, it's weird what they'll give you, and they're like, there's no way he's going to finish it. And then I started getting halfway through it, and people were cheering me on, and I, it looked like it was going to smother me. But then in the end, I smothered it, so... but that's why, and then they took me in secret. Story. Yeah, and they took me in secret hiding and behind a waterfall.
Jake's courageous story of overcoming burrito adversity.
It was huge. The stakes were against me. The steaks, chickens, pork that was inside of it, they were all against me.
Hey, I'm hungry now. But well done, sir. Well done.
Let's wrap it up and serve it up. What's on the show today?
On the show, we talk about law firm sales strategies with an article from attorneyatwork.com. And then I had a chance to speak with intake guru Chris Mullins about her new book, Law Firm Conversions. And as always, we get the facts, and just the facts, from our guest with 5 questions we ask everyone.
Pull up a plate. It's the Hot Takes Buffet.
The hot take today is from Beth Kuzone and Jonathan Hellerman from Hellerman Communications. It's a guest blog on attorneyatwork.com. It's entitled Serving Up Strategy? Save Law Firm Sales Pros a Seat at the Table. I brought this to the table because I wasn't there with Chris's interview, and I was reflecting on intake being sort of integral to sales, being an outcropping of marketing activity, but not really having a seat at the strategic table when it came to management decisions at the firm. And this is exactly what this article says. I'll start with this quote, right from the top. It says, the results from the Legal Sales and Service Organization survey, released in November 2018, confirms that the role of law firm sales professional is becoming commonplace in the profession. But despite the critical role sales professionals now play in driving bottom line growth, the report reveals a disconnect in the way these professionals are valued and given a voice within their firm. What was your hot take on this article, and then kind of connect it to intake and sort of the role of sales? Because we've had people on before talking about intake How does this connect to what you and Chris talked about later? And
Yeah,
what?
man. So what I like about this, and you kind of threw me a little bit when you picked this one because it's about sales, but I realized it's important. I think we should start calling it what it is. It is sales. Intake is sales.
I
You need
totally
people
agree.
who are gonna qualify in, qualify out, and then start to close that deal. They're gonna warm up, they're gonna warm up that lead and pass them along to you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think it's important to look at that as what it is, because it's much more than just answering the phone.
Yeah.
You're expecting that unicorn to come in, with everything all lined up, all the documents they need, all the questions answered the right way. It's not going to happen that way.
Mm-hmm.
It rarely happens that way.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm really surprised that some of the stuff in this article says, um, there's inconsistent reporting structures,
Mm-hmm.
weird responsibilities,
Mm-hmm.
and the worst of all is it says they don't participate in, management meetings or hold direct client responsibility. So
Mm-hmm.
here's this critically important link in the chain.
Hmm.
I mean, effectively the bridge between your marketing, and your client, signups,
Well said.
and you're just like, yeah, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Yeah.
what I think, man.
Yeah, no, well, but that's what's reality. And when you look at this report, from Hellerman Communications, they're a marketing firm that helps, law firms, handle marketing. You're right. It's this bridge, and it's just thought of a causeway. It's less of this more hollowed ground, where you really need to staff up and make it look great. And that's sort of the main complaint, is that it was so sweet in the front, and then I fell off because sales is usually really good at bringing people in. It's the people on the other end that need to start thinking from a sales mentality. Intake folks are warming up those leads, just like you were talking about. Chris Mullins, that Intake Academy, we did that at my old firm. It was wildly successful. But it would happen that the case management system that would be beyond the sales, beyond the campaign, that's where things got hairy. But that's where you need sales strategically helping you. It's not just that. It's interesting because I think sales needs to be thought of, marketing needs to be thought of as a cohesive through line of the whole experience. And if it isn't, then you're running the risk of having these inconsistent measurements. You're running the risk of having misdefined roles and responsibilities. So it's interesting because the solution that they suggest is rethink the titles. Maybe this business development, this law firm salesperson should be thought of as a client liaison or some sort of service angle. You can find reasons to attend the management meetings, because this is what I was thinking, that strategy that comes from the top will be enacted by people downstream. So if this real strategic thinking, your intake professionals are using that when they behave, and that's like that through the whole case experience. So having sales and marketing staff at your management meetings is key. I agree with that. But this last tip is align goals and sales objectives with firm revenue. It's the returning. It's like the carousel that just keeps spinning around. It's like, if you're not aligning this activity with revenue, understanding profit, really, really getting the business development angle of it and measuring it, then it will always be hard to measure. Then it will always, be this thing that you won't focus on. But people who have a goal and a strategy, like Chris, has written tons of books. Has come up with playbooks, and we went through her onboarding process for our intake staff, and it was brilliant at my old firm. I'm telling you, I'm sad that I missed this interview because she's someone who's sort of thought of an answer for this. But I think the main takeaway is something that you said, is that it needs to be happening throughout all of it. Like, salespeople aren't the only sales persons. Do you know what I mean?
True. And it's interesting for me. There's some stuff that kind of popped up, but I had a very hard time. And this is something that you brought way back when we were, doing our other things and working for the law firms and stuff. You said our sales staff. You were always saying, I need to bring it to the sales team, and that was weird for me. That was a very strange thing, because I was always like, what do you mean sales? Like I picture people cold calling, like, "Hi, do you need a lawyer?" No, okay, sorry.
We thought about that. It's a little weird.
It's kind of, but I think, when you're talking about rethinking titles, that's a very basic thing that hit me right there. Like that needs to be approached that way, because that's what that is. And there's one other thing with that it doesn't necessarily say in here. I think it talks about putting people on commission or something like that, but accountability. If you give someone that title and you say you have sales goals, that means that no longer are you going to have this drop off between, what I spent on Google AdWords and how many clients I signed up. You're going to have someone right there who's responsible for that,
and connecting it and making it accountable. But you said it at the beginning, it's a bridge. It's the bridge in between marketing, sales, and, your advertising and your marketing and your sales and the case management experience and the way you guys lawyer and the way you disperse and the way that you say goodbye and the way that you follow up. This is all one giant. That's the strategy. That's the bread that has the sandwich inside of it. So having the people who understand that at the strategic level is key, and that's tough. That's a tough nut to crack, because a lot of management people are just saying this is a business decision, so we're just going to do what's right for the firm. But there's some answers that can come from some really surprising places, but sales is intake, is marketing, is your law firm experience, and it's all connected.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I talked to Chris about later, there's, once you get into that mindset, just as in other verticals, there's different kind of sales, there's buyer's journeys and kind of sales scripts,
funnels,
stuff like that.
Funnels
Absolutely.
and tunnels.
Yes. You definitely burrows the sales burrow.
It's crazy. It's getting wild.
Dude, they're all over. I can't keep these things out of my house.
The leads are burrowing under the firm.
But the point is, once you start doing that, you can start to approach it with that mindset. And Chris has some really good examples of just simple things you can do to start gaining those people's trust and getting those people to come along, those prospects to come along. Saying things like, instead of being like law firm, you can say, "Hey, my name's Paul. How can I direct your call? Or how can I help you today?" Those are two different things that, you're going to have to test those kind of things. Like, what's a better way to answer the phone? And that's, if you put someone in charge of that, and you incentivize them, you can bet they're going to find the best way to get that done.
Yeah. And so the hot take ends in a really amazing way. And then, we'll skip to the interview to get Chris's intakes on intakes. But from this article, it says, what can law firms do in regards to sales professionals, incorporating them into the law firm business development strategy. Law firms are serving an increasingly sophisticated client base. Firms need true sales professionals to help anticipate those clients' needs and be proactive in their approach to service. So if you're committed to serving sales to your clients to facilitate relationships, then you have to reserve your senior sales and marketing professionals a seat at the table. After all, they're responsible for bringing your guests of honor.
Lawson continues. But first, a word from our sponsor.
Since 1999, ConsultWebs has been helping law firms connect with clients on the web, connect digital marketing success with firm success, and connect their business goals to proven strategies that help them get the most out of their legal marketing. Go to consultwebs.com to learn more.
And now, for a Lawsome interview
Chris Mullins is a sales and marketing expert and the founder of Conversions, the Intake Academy, and Mullins Media Group. For more than 30 years, her proprietary and guided training programs, Chris, along with her team, have helped hundreds of law firms around the country convert more prospects into profitable clients. In her latest book, Law Firm Conversions, she covers every aspect of what any lawyer needs to do to ensure that phone calls, the first touch point with clients, convert to become profitable clients. And we are so grateful that Chris could join us today on the show. Chris, welcome to Lawsome.
Yeah, thank you so much. And it's actually, it's lawfirmconversions.com in the Intake Academy, just to kind of throw that little tweak in there.
We'll put all kinds of links and everything in the show notes. Don't worry.
Okay, so go ahead.
We got you covered.
Sounds good.
Okay. Let's get to it. Tell us about Law Firm Conversions, the book. What inspired you to write it? And what do you hope readers will take away from it?
Well, the subtitle of the book is Great Marketing is Not Enough If Your Prospects Don't Convert. And so, what we want readers to take away from it, managing partners in particular, is that you're spending thousands and millions of dollars on marketing to get your telephones to ring with prospects, to get prospects to opt in via your website or your chat services, but we're not doing anything to pay attention. What happens when we get all those great leads that we've just spent maybe an average of $300 per lead to dial your number? So we really want managing partners to just focus on intake and focus on what happens when those leads are successfully coming through, because the leads are coming through. The marketing that you're doing is working, but you forgot about what do we do when it works? How do we take care of those leads?
And that's a great point, because I've run into it myself where it almost becomes an afterthought. And unfortunately, what happens then is the marketing gets the blame if the caseloads aren't going up. So it's interesting. So besides recording the calls, do you have any thoughts on the most effective way for a law firm to start understanding how their intake is performing and maybe identifying any weak spots?
Well, the only way, as long as legally you can do it, you want to check the laws for your state with recording calls. But that is, as long as you can do it, that's the single most important thing that you can do to understand what's happening with your intakes and to improve your conversions, is to listen to your prospect call recordings. There is nothing else. If for some reason you can't, or you don't have that system in place, or you can't listen to your prospect call recordings from legal issues or technology issues, you could do mystery calls. You could call your law firm and your intake team and play prospective client and record that call and then share that information with your team, what worked and what were the opportunities. And then in addition to that, you can actually do side-by-side coaching. Sit next to your intake team. Obviously, you want to have a team lead doing that, somebody that has been experienced in how to coach and train your team, but they can sit side by side next to the intake specialist and listen to both sides of the telephone conversation by getting a splitter. Or if for some reason you don't have a splitter, you can at least sit there, and even if you're only hearing one side of the conversation, you can get a pretty darn good idea at how the call is going by how the intake specialist is acting with their behaviors at their desk and by what they're saying. So there's a long list of things that you can do, and there's no reason why you can't do any of them.
It's interesting that you say intake specialist, because a lot of times it's one person, office manager covering the phones, holding down the reception area and all that stuff. It can be a lot. And I would imagine that it can be kind of a harsh reality for people listening if they've never recorded their calls. That can be a tough thing to listen to, especially if you think everything is going good. And now you're presented with that. Have you ever run into any friction there where it's been like 180 degrees from what they thought to what was actually happening?
every single time. Every single time. I've been doing this for 25 years. 95% of our clients are law firms worldwide of all different niches and all different sizes. And every time they call and they get a free mystery call consult with us, and the managing partner gets on the phone, we play the call for them. It is, I couldn't repeat to you during this interview some of the things that are said during that consultation. They are shocked.
I bet. But I mean, everybody's got to start somewhere, right? And I think at least identifying, that maybe there is an issue is, while it's tough, that's a good first step. From some of the other resources I've talked to about intake and stuff, they say things like, answer the phone with a smile. But that seems like kind of an oversimplification of what needs to be a larger approach, and there's more to it, right? I mean, what role does mindset play in training your clients on phone techniques?
Yeah, I mean, smile is a definite, but I mean, the first thing is this is 2019, and we still have most law firms that don't have their own intake specialist team, whether it's 2 people or 30 people, depending on the size of the firm. And they're doing what you said earlier. They're using the receptionist, the office manager, their wife, their husband, their kids to handle their phone calls. So it has to, the mindset has to start at the top and start with fixing that and really have a legitimate intake team, which is really your sales team, which is really part of your marketing team, which is where you're spending your marketing dollars. So that mindset has to start at the top and just get that fixed, or just stop spending money on marketing completely, and then you won't have to worry about it. And we all know that you're not going to do that. And then the intake specialists, they need to be trained not just on how to smile, but on how to handle prospective clients that call in, because these clients that are calling, they have horrific, traumatic stories and events. The things that your intake specialists are listening to, the stories and the trauma all day long, your intake specialists are taking on that very trauma every day, all day long. They're absorbing it just by hearing these terrible stories. So mindset is critical. You've got to have the right team members, but they need to have the right support and the right coaching to help them get through these difficult calls. Smiling is important, but also controlling the call and redirecting the call and providing empathy and love, care, and concern. And then at the end of the day, your intake specialist needs to know what's the desired outcome of a prospect call. And their answer should be to convert them as long as they qualify. But I'll guarantee you, if you go and you ask your intake specialist or whomever is playing that role that question, you're going to be very surprised at the answer they give you.
Talking about it being 2019, I have still called law firms and have heard them answer the phone just by going law firm. Even if you smile, you're not going to cover that up. So I'm very grateful to hear you talk about empathy, talk about starting at the beginning with your marketing and everything, and looking at the client experience. You're very right. This could be a very traumatic thing, and I think it's important to be clear that there has to be a system to help people through this from both sides, whether it's the client experience side or from your intake side, that the end result here is to sign this client and get them the help they need, which is beneficial for both sides. So even though it might seem unnatural or unnecessary or something like that, I think not giving that initial point of contact the attention it deserves is a huge mistake. So speaking of mistakes, I have to ask. I've had other people on who have worked in reception and stuff. What's the worst you've ever heard, without naming names? I mean, what was?
Okay, I can tell you. Believe me, I can tell you. The worst I've ever heard And it was actually the managing partner that got to hear it too, because they did one of our mystery call consultations with us. And we played the call for them. And the intake specialist literally told the prospect that we're too busy here. And they gave them the phone number of the competitor down the road.
Oh, man. Oh, my gosh. Okay, so that's well, on the plus side, that's pretty easy to fix, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Crazy. So keeping that in mind, what's one thing our listeners could start doing right now, like today, that would improve their intake?
Yep. I'm going to tell you that the absolute truth. There's only one thing that you have to do, and it will improve your conversion, and it will improve you understanding as a managing partner what it's like to be an intake specialist every day, all day long, which, by the way, it wouldn't hurt to jump on the phone once in a while and get that experience yourself. But this will help you to improve conversion without a doubt, without even doing any aggressive training, which you should do training. But this is like I'm giving you the minimum. Listen to your phone calls. We call it RMFD, and it stands for Record, Monitor, Feedback Daily, RMFD. And so if you just have a system in place where you're listening to your call recordings, your prospect call recordings, you're monitoring them, and you're providing feedback to that team member and or the team as a group or mini group on what worked, and then, like what the opportunities are for improvement, and then you teach them how to improve it. If you only did that one thing, put that one system in place, or if you can't legally for some reason, do mystery calls and do the same process, what you focus on expands, what gets measured gets done. So just by doing that action, you'll improve conversion and you'll support and help your intake team. It won't be easy. They won't like it, only because nobody likes to have their calls listened to, and nobody likes to listen to their recorded voice. So you need to be, compassionate about that and help them along. But that's all you have to do. That one thing, and you will see your conversion improve.
Yeah, I mean, it's not even limited to just the phones. I mean, I know if you want to be a better musician, you got to record yourself and listen to it because you think you're playing great. That may not be the case. To go a little further though with your system and particularly an acronym, you teach intake and conversions with what you call the intake INTAKE system, which focuses on 4 core areas. So can we get a little deeper on that? Can you tell me, aside from like one quick fix, what's the overview of that system and how do you think it's more effective than some of the other things that are out there?
So our system, it's a 5-step relationship sales conversion script is what it is. And we don't want anybody to sound scripted or robotic. So we'll just take that right off the table. We can teach, and you can teach your team how to use a script, any script, and not sound scripted. It takes time, but they can do it and still use the language and the verbiage that you want. But our 5-step system focuses on step number 1 is what we call the introduce. And it's really the same concept as a greeting. So it's how you handle the telephone. It's how you answer the call. So, welcome to ABC Law Firm. This is Chris speaking. How can I help you? It's that simple. And then the person asks their question. They say what they're calling for. And you say, I can help you with that. May I ask your name? And that's step number 1. That's introduced. We focus on relationships first, business second. So everything, even with the scripting, it's assumptive language. We know it's also salesmanship, but we focus on the relationship part of the conversation, the experience first, and then the business items second. And so the step number 2 on the 5-step script is what we call the talk step. And with the talk step, that's where all the magic is happening. That's where you're asking the prospect screening questions to find out if they qualify, if you can even help them. That's where we teach your team to do what we call sing and check in. And singing means we teach your team to change the inflection and the tone in their voice while they ask screening questions, which is called singing, so that they don't sound like license and registration. Then we also teach your team in the intake, in the talk step number 2, we also teach them how to do what we call check-in. So to humanize the conversation while they're asking screening questions, we teach them how to periodically just check in with the caller and say things like, "You're doing a great job," or "We just have a couple of questions left," or "The next question I'm going to ask might be a difficult question, but I do need to ask it. Thank you so much for your patience with all these questions." So that just breaks up the screening question process, humanizes the conversation, brings in an experience, and helps the caller to feel like you really do care about them too. And that right there is what we call the talk step, number 2. And that's a big step because that's where the prospect is deciding, yes, no, yes, no. Do I like this person? And by the way, they're not asking themselves if they like your law firm. They're asking if they like the intake specialist, or do I not like this person? They're making their decision in step number 2. And then step number 3 is what we call the acknowledge step. And this is where you're acknowledging the person for everything they just said to you prior to step 3. So that's in the talk step. And then you're making a recommendation based on everything that they said in step number 2, the talk step. The talk step is where you find out, can you help them or can you not help them? So in number 3, you're either going to say, "Mrs. Smith, based on what you've said, this is a case that we can help you with. I'm going to schedule you to come into our office at 3 o'clock tomorrow." That would be one example based on what you said. So based on everything that you just said prior to this step, and then the recommendation, "I'm scheduling an appointment." And you do it with assumptive language at the same time. Or you might be saying, "Mrs. Smith, based on what you've said, this is not a case that we can help you with, but here's how we can help you. If you have pen and paper, I've got some resources I can provide to you." And that's where you go above and beyond, and you make sure you do your due diligence, and you have some really solid resources that can really help this person. Because when they hang up the phone from you, whether you can help them or not, you still want them to feel like, "Holy cow, that was an amazing experience. And I'm going to call them when I do need help, and maybe they can help me next time. And I'm definitely going to refer them." So that's step number 2. And that's also like the call to action, very assumptive language. And then step number 4 is what we call the confirm step. And we spell confirm with a K, because if you've noticed so far, step 1, 2, and 3, and now 4, I'm about to spell the word intake, which is an acronym. And that makes it easier for people to remember our 5-step system.
Mhm.
So step number 4 is confirm. So what we do is most intake specialists in the talk step, when they're asking screening questions, they collect all the contact information for that prospect in most cases. So all we want them to do is when they get to step number 4, no matter what, you always finish the 5 steps, whether you can help this person or not. And step 4, we just want you to say, "Mrs. Smith, before we go, let me just verify your contact information to make sure I got it right." So what you're doing is you're validating Mrs. Smith. You're helping her to realize, I've been here the whole time. I haven't forgotten you. And I got your contact information correct, and I'm going to prove it. And you're going to spell everything out. You're going to repeat phone numbers. If you did forget something in step 2, you're going to collect it in step number 4. And then the last step, step number 5. This is the Ritz-Carlton, the big red bow, love, care, and concern all the way, giving an exceptional experience no matter what. Step 5 is called execute, and it's done in several steps. First, you're going to thank them for calling. Next, you're going to say, "I look forward to you coming in for your appointment tomorrow at 3 o'clock. Then you're going to say, "Mrs. Smith, if for some reason you're running behind for your appointment, would you just promise to give me a call? Question mark, pause, wait for the answer. And then you're going to do what we call the final hug, the wow closing, and it's done in 3 steps. Thank you again for calling. Did I answer all your questions? Question mark, pause, wait for the answer. Is there anything else I can help you with? Question mark, pause, wait for the answer. And that is the 5-step relationship sales conversion script. The very, very last point in step number 5, execute, and it needs to be done at the end of the call is, oh, Mrs. Smith, who can we thank for referring you? And this is where Mrs. Smith is going to realize, wow, you get referrals. This must be a great law firm. And she's also going to be thinking, maybe I'll be referring too. And that's the 5-step system.
That's amazing. And I think, 2 things I thought of while you were laying that out. Number one, coming at it from an attitude of trying to help people, even if like your firm actually won't be able to take the case, but you're still in that mindset of, but I don't want you to, I'm not going to just hang up and be like, good luck, sucker. There's empathy and gratitude built into that. And that is only going to come back to you in a good way. But the other thing I thought of too is years and years ago, I worked for a company that did phone surveys. So after you had the phone company out and they worked on their line or whatever, we would call up and say, hey, how'd everything go? All this stuff. And I was blown away. And this is probably what led me to get into advertising, about the specific language, and how you had to guide the conversation by doing certain things. Like instead of saying, okay, we had to say, all right. And so it just struck me, like when you were talking about, you don't say, you say, how can I help you today? And not how can I guide your, how can I direct your call? That takes time, testing, and experience to figure that out. And like I said, I worked for a big company. They paid big dollars for that. The fact that you're implementing this stuff and so willing to work with people and put that knowledge to use, it makes a huge difference. I mean, every lawyer should know words matter. And this is what we're talking about. So, unbelievable. So if people want to learn more about you, want to talk about some coaching, want to find your book, Chris, how do people find you?
The best thing that you can do is just go to our website, lawfirmconversions.com. You're going to see where you can buy the book easily. You're going to see where you can opt in for a free mystery call and consultation, where we do a mystery call and debrief with the managing partner. And there's also, you're going to have our phone number there, and you're also going to have an email address, support@lawfirmconversions.com. So everything that you need is right at that website.
5 questions we ask everyone.
Number 1, what was the last book you read?
Let's see. The last book I read, The Pinball Machine. It's a novel.
Nice. Number 2, what is your favorite place?
My favorite place is the ocean, any location.
Righteous. All right. Number 3, what sites, blogs, newsletters, or podcasts do you regularly check in with?
Podcast Jeff Sanders, and he does a lot of personal development, personal growth. He mixes it up quite a bit, but it's Jeff Sanders.
Cool. All right. Number 4, if you were stranded on a desert island and could only pick one condiment to take with you, what would that be?
Let's see. Oh, well, I call this a condiment because I've just recently turned vegan. It's hummus. I would take hummus with me. Nice.
That's a great answer. Okay. Last one, number 5. After a long day or a long week at work, how do you relax and unwind?
I like to do what I just did this past weekend, and I like to do races. So I did a 6-mile race with my trekking poles in the woods and just dove into the mud because that was the only way to get across to the next trail.
Oh my gosh, that sounds amazing.
For show notes, links, and info, go to thelawsonpodcast.com or follow us on Twitter or Facebook. Be sure to leave us a review and rating in iTunes or wherever you find the you listen to. Until next week, stay lawsome.